Good morning to you. It is 10:36 on a Monday morning. We switch to mid-morning money here, brought to you by Bain O'Leary, Minnesota's retirement experts. And on a Monday morning, joined to talk about all kinds of business as it relates to where we live, Dale Kurschner joins me he's a Twin Cities-based business analyst and advisor, talking about all things related business. Hey, good morning, Dale. I hope you had a good week. Thanks for being on with me this morning.
Good morning, John.
So let's talk about this. General Mills has lost $17 billion in market value in the last 2 years. What's happening?
Yeah, it's just amazing when you look at the stock. That company for years was one of the best performing businesses in Minnesota, from a stock perspective. And so, yeah, it's just, we've seen some things going on with other food companies. Most recently, Campbell Soup last week had some disappointing numbers, and I think that probably dinged General Mills further. But they just have not had a very cohesive growth strategy for a few years now, at least. And they haven't been doing a lot of fresh, innovative product creation, which they used to be known for. They kind of gave up on that over 5 or 6 years ago. So I think a lot of people are wondering, where's the next growth opportunity for these guys? Meanwhile, as you know, a lot of speculation late last year that somebody might come in and buy them. And the reason why it's interesting to look at how much that price of their stock has dropped, it's a lot more affordable now for somebody to come in and buy them. So, you look at all those things, where's the growth strategy? The stock prices come down a lot, and they have a lot of debt that is still on their books. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, indeed. That is one of those situations, because it would be strange to see the company taken over by somebody else who might feel that they have another way of running it or could run it better.
Yeah, and another possibility would be, would General Mills maybe spin off part of itself? I don't know if a lot of listeners remember, but they used to be, I think, the second largest toy or game
that's
manufacturer.
right.
They used to own Parker Brothers, and they invented the black box flight recorder that's used in planes. And so they've had different incarnations in the past, and we'll see what happens.
That's right. I forgot about this. You and I have chatted about that in the past, just some of the innovative things that have come from General Mills over the years. So, yeah, it's a lot more than just flour. Definitely that.
Absolutely.
Hey, tell me about the Supreme Court ruling that looks to have delivered a pretty serious blow to workers who could be required to sign away your ability to ever bring any kind of a suit against your employer.
Yeah, it's Supreme Court came out with that decision this morning. It was a split decision. It's really challenging. I mean, a lot of states are already doing something like this. Even Minnesota, there are employers who are doing this too, where they say, if you want to work for us, you have to agree up front to basically not ever bring a class action lawsuit against us in any way, shape, or form. And it has to go through arbitration if you have a complaint. A lot of people are like, well, most employees can't afford to do something through an arbitration process. So, and if you do have a class action situation, you should have the legal right to move forward with that. So that's what some people have been saying. That's what the lower courts had also kind of said off and on. The Supreme Court took a look at it and said, nope, you know what? If you want to work for these companies can force you to sign that. And if you don't like it, you don't have to work for them.
Now, how does that stand, though? Because, as you pointed out, too, Minnesota has a higher percentage of union membership than the national average. Well, we've seen the number steadily decrease nationwide. In Minnesota, these numbers have stayed relatively the same as they did. As a matter of fact, in 2017, they rose by a full percentage point.
Yeah, they're up to 15.2% of our folks here in Minnesota are union members. And nationally, it's only about, maybe about 11%. So it's going to be interesting to see here how much some of our employee groups continue to fight against these types of things. When the Supreme Court comes out with a decision like this, that's very limiting with regards to that side of things. But on the flip side, does this give union organizers more power to say, hey, you need to have collective bargaining rights now to protect you, instead of going in as a single employee saying, okay, I'm just going to sign what the management makes me sign. So, it's one thing to say you want to sue a company as a class action lawsuit. It's another to say you want to challenge a company as part of a union. And the union has a whole different set of rights versus the individual employees. So in a state where we're already gravitating more toward having even more union members, this could actually kind of fuel the fire a little bit with the union leaders out there saying you need to join a union to be protected.
Yeah, that would be it just change things considerably, I think, for a lot of folks. Let's talk about a couple of other stories that are coming up here. The way that they regulate the internet in this state, the Public Utilities Commission is going to take up this matter this week yet.
Yeah, Minnesota Public Radio had a good story on this, and I didn't even realize that the Public Utilities Commission here could do that. But basically, Frontier has had so many complaints against their slow and intermittent internet speed that the PUC now wants to take this up and say, okay, we're going to investigate and look into this. Frontier, meanwhile, is saying, no, this is something that the Federal Communications Commission oversees, and states have no right to do that. So this, too, could become some kind of court battle, depending on what happens here. But it would be interesting from a precedent-setting perspective because, should the Public Utilities Commission go forward with some of the things it's looking at doing? Should some kinds of enforcements and rulemaking be created? It could be precedent-setting, not only in this state, but then other states.
A couple of other stories to share. That's one that we will definitely watch. A couple of other stories to share here. Chatting with Dale Kurschner, Minneapolis-based business analyst and advisor. More women are leading farming operations in this state. What's the news there?
The Duluth News-Tribune had a great story on this. And it says that in the last 20 years, there's been a 20% increase in women farmers, women leading farms. And that's really cool. I mean, when I was a kid, it was like just trying to keep kids on the farm was a challenge, but most of the farmers I knew always figured it had to be their boys who would take over the farms.
Oh, yeah.
So, now it's nice to see that more and more women are taking over and leading these family farms. And it's also interesting because there are fewer farms out there. So it was an interesting sign of the times story that the Duluth News-Tribune has.
Yeah, a couple of interesting examples in there as well that you point out. Some of these young women who have gone away to go to college, maybe studied something in a different direction, and decided, no, I want to come back and I want to come back to the family farm, which is it's got to be good for agriculture in this state as we seem to lose some family farms.
Mm-hmm. And in family businesses in general, we've talked in the past about that same kind of storyline where the kids go away, they maybe get an education or they work elsewhere, and then they come back to the family business. So it's nice to see it's actually being applied in the family business of farming as well.
Okay. What's the story here with Anytime Fitness and being one of their largest Anytime Fitness franchise has been acquired, right?
Very interesting. I don't know if you remember, we used to have a Burger King franchisee here in Minnesota, and I forget the name, but it was basically, I think it was the largest franchisee of Burger King restaurants in the country. And it was an individual who did a great job of acquiring different franchises and pulling them all together into one master franchise and then sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars later on. The reason why this is cool for Anytime Fitness is it's further validation of the quality and the value of having these fitness centers. There's a franchisee down in Austin, Texas called Bandon Holdings. They're the ones that have been acquired by Fireman Capital Partners. That announcement came out this morning as well. And Bandon has 38 Anytime Fitness clubs right now. And these guys who acquired them want to help them continue to acquire additional franchises and continue to scale that up because there's good money in doing that.
Yeah, and this story is important, I think, too, because Anytime Fitness, as people should know, is based here in Minnesota. It began here in Minnesota. I've mentioned this more than once, Dale, when you and I have been chatting. That's where I participate. Not nearly as often as I should, but I
know the feeling.
I love the aspect of this, and I've used this in other parts of this country. That same fob that gets me into the one closest to my home is the same fob that gets me into one in California or one in Boston or wherever I may be. It's just
same here.
Yeah,
it's just so cool. They have 4,000 fitness centers in more than 30 countries now, and even when I was in Glasgow, I was out for a run. There was an Anytime Fitness. I went in there and it worked fine.
Seriously, in Scotland?
Yeah. I mean, they're just everywhere.
Son of a gun. Well, that is interesting. Yeah. Hey, finally, this is a great story, too, because this is a long-time business serving Minnesota, Shorewood RV Center. Tell me about that story.
Just so fun to think that now, if you want to, you can buy shares of stock in Shorewood RV. It's going to be renamed Lazy Days Holdings. Lazy Days is, they say they have the world's largest recreational dealership with 126 acres of RVs outside of Tampa, Florida. They're acquiring Shorewood RV. And so it's one of those things where I think a lot of people have RVs. They've probably heard of these guys or have done business with them.
Sure.
And once again, it's an investment play. Lazy Days sees this as one of the top 10 RV states in the country, and they see that Shorewood is one of the very best RV centers. So it should be a really good deal, and it should bring more products and more service offerings to Shorewood RV.
A lot of good stories there to share, as always, Dale. When you cull some of these stories from your various sources out there, so I appreciate you bringing them back and sharing with me on WCCO Radio. We were talking about this a little bit ago, and the market had a big upsurge in it this morning. What's the latest that we know about the trade wars? I'm going to have a conversation later in the show here, but it's like the trade war with China has been put on hold.
That's the talk. And, whenever the rhetoric turns positive instead of negative, then that helps the markets. So, I think like a lot of things, the proof is in what actually happens months from now.
Right.
But we were on such a negative track with the dialogue. And you've seen a little bit of a situation with North Korea where will that happen or not? President Trump's meeting with him. But with China, that's really important. I think what we need to see now, though, for it to have a lasting effect is something more having to do with Canada and Mexico, because for Minnesota especially, what we're doing with those two countries is more important than what's going on with China, which basically can do what it wants regardless of what we're talking about.
Yeah, but especially for Minnesotans and the companies that are here, the agricultural products that are here, we need to have these deals in place with Mexico and with Canada. So, hey, good stuff as always, Dale. I look forward to chatting with you next Monday.
Sounds good, John. Have a great week.
You take care. Bye-bye. It is 10:48. That's your Lindus Construction time check. Time to improve the look of your home with Leaf Guard brand gutters.